What's up, guys? Welcome to Roensch Capital Charts. Today we're taking a look at the ever so popular S&P 500 ETF SPY, ticker symbol SPY, on a variety of time frames in anticipation of the next trading day, Monday, June 3rd. All right, guys, so SPY here to finish out this last week, finished up $4.76 per share. That's plus 0.91% in regular trading hours. We were up about another dollar in the after hours, but as always, take that with a grain of salt. Volume was a bit low. So listen, guys, let's take a look at SPY and get the best possible feel that we can heading into this week, specifically tomorrow, Monday. We're going to do that by taking a look at the directional bias in the volume profile. We'll take a look at the psychological trading levels that a lot of decisions are going to be made around here tomorrow. Implied volatility, we'll look at expected move for tomorrow and the directional bias coming out of the chain for tomorrow. So let's get started here with the volume profile analysis, taking a look at any directional bias that may be present from Friday here on the 5-minute chart as we head into this coming week. Listen, guys, by the way, if you are new here and or if you appreciate the daily SPY coverage, SPY is a daily upload. Please leave a like on the video. That lets YouTube know to drip these into your feed each day. Make it really easy for you to find each day's analysis. So let's take a look under the hood here and see if we have some clear bias out of the bears or the bulls as we head into this coming week. Now, off the open, guys, actually somewhat of a lower volume open. Well, let's zoom back in here. Somewhat of a lower volume open and really nothing extraordinary at all on this downside move. You guys remember the first half of Friday was basically a downside push, and the volume compared to the close was actually quite low. Now, as we came into the close, understand first of all, this first bar before the close, or I should say the last bar before the closing bell, is going to be a rebalancing bar typically, where we see a lot of buying and selling volume going on from algorithms doing rebalancing into the end of the day or week in this case. The sheer size, though, of this volume, on top of the fact that we saw many consecutive green bars into the close, guys, that is some heavy bullish bias heading into the end of this last week and the beginning of this week. Okay. Now, on a scale of 0 to 100, I'm going to give this like 70%. It could be crazier. It can always be a little bit crazier, but that's one of the higher scores that I'll give in terms of directional bias, at least coming out of the volume profiles. Typically, we're usually down below 50% when we're assigning bias, but this is very clear, especially given over 11 million shares traded on that last candle. Now, let's take a look. Let's move on and take a look at the psychological self-fulfilling prophecy trading levels that we need to be aware of heading in to this coming week. Now, back on Friday, we had talked about heading into Friday that this 50 period on the 30-minute chart, and the gray line's the 200 period, by the way, the 50 period was going to very much so be a trading level that a lot of people were paying attention to because we had struggled with it on Thursday. Well, we were struggling with it here on SPY basically until the last hour or 30 minutes of the day, where we ripped off of that, treating that as a trampoline, claiming it and treating it as support, pushing us through the 200 period. Listen, that's a great thing to see out of SPY to end this last week. Now, tomorrow, bulls, what we want to see, first of all, I want to see this 50 period get ripped higher. Ideally, if we can get above the 200 period, not for the sake of the crossover itself, just for the sake of the quicker moving average being treated as the nearest potential support, that would be great for bulls. Also, if we downside test whichever one happens to be higher at the time, the 200 period or the 50, I expect the 50 is going to get ripped upside on Monday. Okay. If we downside test, I want to treat whichever one is higher as the support level, seeing a high volume bounce off of that level, claiming the higher of the two as support. Bears, this 50 is likely to move upside. If you guys could rip down through both the 200 period and the 50 with one move, retest it on lower volume, whichever one happens to be lower at the time, and then reject hard back on higher volume, that's how you guys win the 30-minute here on Monday. Now, let's move on to the 4-hour. You can see we got a little bit hung up on the 50 period here on the 4-hour chart heading into the close on Friday. So, tomorrow, the 4-hour chart is all about the battle of the 50 period. Bulls, if we can claim that as support, that would be beautiful. Something we haven't really been able to do, at least for any sustained period of time, in over a week. All right, bears, ideally you guys are going to want to get below the 200 period, right? Well, that all starts with rejecting off the 50 here tomorrow, treating the 50 as resistance. Bears, of course, bulls, you guys would not want to see this. Bears, this is what you guys do want to see. Reject hard off the 50 and start heading back down toward the middle of that channel, down toward the 200 period on the 4-hour chart. That puts you kind of in the position that you want to be within reasonable volatility expectation for a single day. Now, the most important chart of all, guys, is always going to be the daily. We got actually pretty close on Friday to a test of the 50-day moving average. Didn't actually get one, but we now find ourselves pretty, we're looking at least a 2% downside move to test the 50-day, which anything over plus or minus 1% move in terms of SPY is a pretty volatile day. So I think really the story here on SPY tomorrow is a couple of levels. 525, each $5 increment or so is going to be somewhat of a psychological level on SPY. Bulls, if we could hold 525 as support, beautiful. But really the goal, bulls, remember 530, kind of to 532, but really 530 was a level we've been struggling with a lot in the last 2 weeks. Bulls, if we can get above 530 and hold above 530, that's a win here tomorrow. Okay, bears, any test of 530, rejected ideally. Get back down below 525 and start heading back down toward 520 is how you guys win, I would say, just the day in general, but more specifically the daily chart here on SPY tomorrow. Now, implied volatility, we fell on Friday. Okay. In comparison to the last week, IV is now pretty much in the mid-range. Okay. In comparison to the last month, IV, I would say, is in the mid, perhaps slightly high range when you consider the amount of days spent below this current level. I would say we're about in the mid-range in comparison to the last month. And in comparison to the last 3 months, we're in the mid to maybe slightly lower range. Okay, important to understand the context of where IV stands in relation, or in comparison, I should say, to your intended trade time frame. That helps you position yourself much more effectively with volatility expectation, if you're trading options in particular. Now, the expected move here for tomorrow. We have daily expirations on SPY, which is obviously a luxury. The expected move being priced in currently by tomorrow's close compared to Friday's close is plus or minus $2.72 a share. That's the one standard deviation expected move being priced in by the market. If you disagree with that, that coupled with a strong directional bias is potentially a position for you. All right, that's how I like to think about that. Now, you might be thinking, what about directional bias? Well, let's look at the volume. We had 9.2 million total contracts traded here on Friday. 4.67 million of them were calls and 4.53 million were puts. So slightly bullish bias, but relatively undecided on the overall ratio. But if we break that down by short-term speculators in the 0 to 20 delta range, 1.7 million calls, 1.96 million puts. So we actually flip bearish once we start looking at the short-term speculators in particular. It's not overwhelming. Okay, actually both the short-term speculators and the overall is closer to 50-50 than where you might be used to, but the overall leans slightly bullish, whereas the short-term speculators are leaning slightly bearish. Guys, listen, if you want to get my personal daily scalp setup alerts, in-play stock alerts, unusual options activity, that's how I track what the whales are doing, take a look at that link in the pinned comment and get grandfathered in at that current rate before the rate does go up. That'll make you immune to those price raises that are happening here very near in the future. Hope that helps, guys. I appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one.